getting all our attendees into the main room. Warm welcome to everyone. Great to meet you all. Okay, great. So we're just about into the hour, and first of all, thanks to all who have made it on time. And I know that a few others have just mailed me and said that they're going to come into the webinar a few minutes into it, but we're going to let them in. Delighted to be hosting this webinar. Hi, everyone. My name is Vidya. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Fitbots. I'm really personally very excited today because this is a topic that we've probably not touched upon in most webinars that we've conducted in the past, but it's actually the heart of strategy execution. And that's to conduct OKR check-in meetings that don't suck. So I know it's going to be a really cool discussion today along with our speaker. I also thought I'll introduce Fitbots to those who probably know less about us. I'm really proud to have started Fitbots in 2018 along with my co-founder. What we do is we're really an integrated OKRs with KPIs product, which helps teams really align and set their most important critical high velocity business metrics. But we quickly realized that we're so much more than software because many teams want to actually set OKRs right and want to conduct those check-in meetings to sustain OKRs. So that's where we introduce both the coaching and the certifications. We have over 270 OKR certified practitioners part of our network, more than 3,000 plus OKR enthusiasts who continue to use the software over and over again to maintain their metrics, as well as our coaching, which has really spanned over many, many hours. But before we get into the check-in meetings rhythm, wanted to check with each of you, what's your favorite Netflix series? So if you could hit me up on the Q&A window, that would be enabled for you. So which Netflix series do you really love? Christian, do you have your favorite?
Oh man, that's a good question. Not Netflix, but Succession has been keeping me on my toes.
Okay. All right. So let's hear it from the audience. Anything that you love watching? Okay. We got Queen's Gambit. That's a good one. All right. Money Heist. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Bunny. And no guesses for mine. It's Wednesday Addams, which I think I've probably watched about 6 to 7 reruns along with my 12-year-old. So this is definitely something that I love. But what's really special about these series is that you actually look forward to the next episode. And that's not many a time a case with OKR check-in meetings. So we're going to really delve into, how do you really make this exciting? So on that note, it gives me immense a privilege as well as a pleasure to introduce Christian Ulstrup, who is our speaker for the day. Christian is a creative strategist who's helped many, many organizations, in fact, over 7 years to get OKRs rollouts right. But there's something very special in the way he approaches OKRs. Christian also is a big adopter of AI, and he's really got some exciting stuff about AI in his workshop. So we're going to learn a little more about that, Christian. I'm really excited for that. In the past, he's played many roles as a product manager, product executive, a nonprofit volunteer, as well as a coach to venture-backed startup leaders. A very, very warm welcome. I know I have not done enough of justice to your introduction, but on that note, I'm going to hand it over to you so that we can learn more about yourself and about this exciting topic of how to conduct check-in meetings that don't suck.
Perfect. Vidya, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting me. I'm really looking forward to today's session. I think this is a very hot topic. And as you noted, these meetings sometimes do descend into meetings that, if they don't suck, they're at least not something that people look forward to every week, like a recurring exciting series on HBO or Netflix or something like that. So Vidya already gave you an introduction. I work mostly with business leaders from VC-backed startups, SMBs, corporations, also in the public sector, to help them essentially enter new markets and leverage new technology. Artificial intelligence is something I'm doing with about 90% of my clients right now. But across the board, combination of new tech, new market, and using a very focused, disciplined OKR process where the weekly meetings are exciting, something that people look forward to. That is a consistent recipe for success that I found across industries, across teams, across products and companies of varying sizes. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that today. All right. So the title of this presentation is How to Conduct OKR Check-In Meetings That Don't Suck. And then my little subtitle is The Art of Escaping status update hell. Okay, so we'll talk about what that is. So a little overview. The outcome today is every single one of the attendees here feels confident by the end of this presentation and the Q&A at the end that you can run weekly objective and key result check-ins or sync meetings that not only don't suck, but that team members actually get excited about attending. It might be kind of a tall order, but that is the goal of today's session. First things first, Vidya, just to ask you a quick question. So I have an upfront contract that I have with all my clients, everybody I present to, people I partner with, which is if you feel like at any point you're not getting the expected outcome, your confidence is not increasing that you're going to get value out of attending this presentation, your time is extremely valuable, and I don't want you to feel trapped. So if you know you want to leave, you're not feeling it, you can part ways at any point, and I won't be offended. So all that being said, Vidya, would you like to continue with the presentation today?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's take it to the top.
Awesome. All right. So quick note on Q&A. Some folks I see are posting questions in the chat. This is going to be more didactic, so I'll address most of those questions. Unless there's something, Vidya, if you want to kick it up to me, I can answer it during the presentation. Otherwise, we'll have about 15 minutes at the end to cover some of these particulars. So quick agenda. First half, I'm going to cover sort of the theory of objectives and key results, the way that I think about them and the way that I use them to work with clients, just to kind of frame, what it is we're talking about when it comes to these weekly check-in sync meetings. And then the brass tacks, the nuts and bolts of how to actually run the meeting, how to do the preparation, make sure that the information is shared, and then keep everybody excited on their toes and not dreading going to the next one each week. So that is what we're going to cover. First things first, status update hell. So this is status update hell. Unfortunately, close to 100% of people, I think, who have worked in corporations, who have been a part of a business team, whether it's an early stage startup, or a blue chip company, has experienced this at some point in their careers. Unfortunately, it's probably more common than uncommon. And if I were to define status update hell, this is a recurring meeting where essentially the information that gets shared is not ultimately aligned with what's important for the business. Right. And so everyone kind of goes around in a circle. They've got their cameras off. Folks are not very engaged, especially when we're remote, and they give status updates. And on the project tracker, let's say that you're looking at, things are green, but everyone kind of knows that the building is on fire around them. Right. So that most important objective that you set for the quarter, you're maybe not making as much progress as you would like. And then, of course, sort of I talk about some of the other details, but the point is there's a disconnect between what folks are saying and how you're using the time in the meeting and what everybody knows is actually important. There are a lot of other characteristics as well. We'll talk about kind of my 3 stages. Hopefully you can work through if you are in status update hell. There's, weekly sync, purgatory, and then paradise is the ideal. I'm a fan of Dante. I don't know, this is a reference to his famous poem, but okay, basically on a weekly basis, if you're going into status update hell, everyone feels dread. Maybe they feel defensive, a little bit disorganized. A lot of the prep work, consciously or unconsciously, becomes about justifying the actions that you or your team took, which is, sort of preparing status updates and trying to make sense of the things that you did rather than focusing on what you learned or what you might do that's creative over the next week, which is really where you want to get the meeting and how you get the flow going. So dread, defensive, disorganized, lots of reporting overhead. So you're spending lots of time collecting KPIs, creating slides. I've seen some of these meetings where it's in an hour, people are expected to get through like 30 slides, which is kind of insane. Lots of input. And then in terms of cadence, maybe at best you're doing this once per week. It gets skipped occasionally. Not everybody is in attendance. It's sort of moved around. It's not reliably happening. That's kind of worst case scenario. Things get a little bit better. You're doing it once per week. You never skip. Maybe it's happening in the afternoon after lunch. People are a little bit tired. It's still 60 minutes. The reporting overhead is minimal. So you're inputting a few metrics on a regular basis, but it's not eating up lots of your valuable time. And now you're starting to feel a little bit curious. You're feeling conscientious. You can be disciplined and focused. It's not a mad scramble to get ready every time. And there's a lot more clarity during the meeting. Now, I talk about a few things: confidence scores, stewards. I'm going to dig into what that means in a second in terms of the different roles of the folks during the meeting. And then weekly sync paradise. This is where we all want to end up. It's totally possible to get there in a relatively short period of time. And in this version of the weekly meeting, everyone is excited, they're engaged, and they're energized. And I like to compare this to that weekly, recurring TV special. For me, like I said, it's Succession on HBO. My wife and I, we very much look forward to watching that. And the reason why you look forward to it is because it's a combination of familiar. So there's kind of a disciplined ritual, but also new. So something has changed over the course of the episode. There was a cliffhanger last week. We don't know what's going to happen. Let's find out what happened. Let's make sense of it. And let's figure out what's going to happen next. And we're just wired to be interested and excited in those kind of things. We'll talk about confidence scores, but when it comes to information sharing, minimal overhead, but the information is highly dynamic. So there's lots of change happening that gets incorporated into the meeting. And it's also very, very accurate. So dynamic and accurate. Name of the game, best case scenario, you're doing this every week, Monday mornings at 9 a.m. when everyone's quite fresh. All right, so I want to explain, take a big step back. How does this fit into an overall OKR framework? So the way that I work with clients is, we'll start by implementing a single objective and 3 key results for the entire organization. And the metaphor that I like to use is that setting OKRs, running this quarterly process, is a lot like crossing a foggy river. So you need basically 2 things for this to be a good fit, at least in my playbook. One is that you're trying to do something new. So you're trying to leverage a new technology or enter a new market is a good, that's a good barometer. And then 2, you have a cross-functional team that's coming together to accomplish this big goal, right? Some other core ingredients, you've got the long-term vision articulated, you've got the infinite mission. Mission is just what you're doing basically forever, or maybe 10 years or something like that. And then the vision is a concrete instantiation of accomplishing that mission over a long period of time. Okay. We're not going to cover this in detail, but basically at the beginning of the quarter, you select one of many possible stepping stones is kind of the metaphor that I use as you're trying to cross the river, reduce the fog and the uncertainty. The key is here, there's an art in selecting which one among many you're going to choose, and then you stay hyper-focused on it for the duration of the quarter. Okay, so it's a tool and a process for attaining alignment and generating an information edge. Okay, so let's kind of zoom in here, right? Let's say this is the top-down 30,000 foot view. We're going to tilt the camera to the side a little bit and look at, let's say, the little dot that's on the riverbank on the left side on the present. And what we have here is a body, right? And this was something that occurred to me at some point. I just thought was kind of interesting. Is even in the root of the word corporation is corpus, I believe Latin. The root basically means body, right? And I think this is a useful metaphor for thinking about how all these components fit together and the purpose of these weekly syncs. So just to push the metaphor, the analogy a little bit, your frontal lobe and your body is a little bit like the C-suite. So planning, analysis, thinking about the future, making sense of lots of information, which is coming through your nerves, right? You've got the organs in your organization, different departments, and then individual cells are kind of like team members, right? So everyone's sort of coming together to achieve this higher order goal, which is to cross the foggy river, and your body and all the pieces and parts have to move in conjunction to literally take a step forward, right? Now, the key here is I want to point out sort of this, the importance of understanding the metaphor of the nervous system, right? So at any point in time, there's huge amounts of information, both quantitative and qualitative, that's coming into your data repository as an organization. So those could be frontline conversations that salespeople are having that are not getting written down. Maybe it's transcripts of calls. AI is great for this, by the way. So one of the ways that I'm using it is mining a lot of this unstructured data to make sense of it for executives. But also, your sales metrics, your CRM, all the kind of traditional, business analytics sources. These are kind of like your nerve endings. And the thing is, at any given time, you have, a million, a billion, however many data points, just like we have many nerves that are capturing information constantly, but we can't focus on every single one, certainly in a weekly 60-minute meeting. So the key is to figure out, in the same way, we have emotions and we feel pain or pleasure or interest or any of these things, there are methods by which you can focus the attention of the executive team or the leaders of the cross-functional team only on the information that is most pertinent, where you need to make sense of something new or decide to take a creative action in the future. So this filtering mechanism, which happens through confidence scores and stewardship of key results, is the process by which you run OKR weekly check-in meetings that don't suck. And I'm going to explain the brass tacks of how to do this in just a second. So before I get into methodology, I want to talk about, where we are in this process, what we're going to dig into. Beginning of the quarter, you set the objective and the key results. Not going to talk about mechanics. Maybe we can talk about that during the Q&A. And then that's bookended at the end of the quarter with the reflection. These are, if you zoom into the stepping stones here and here, this is what we're looking at. And what we're really going to dig into with this weekly check-in meeting is the synchronization process. And you're essentially doing three things in this 1 hour or 50-minute meeting with the team. You are making sense of whatever happened over the past week, right? So the signals from the nerve endings that actually are grabbing your attention and should. You are reorienting the entire team, sort of the body or whatever part of it you're focused on, given that new information. And then you're actually engaging in a planning process to leverage those insights to take the best next step, coordinated action to move the ball forward and, reach out in the right direction towards that next stepping stone. So the syncing process is what we're going to dig into. Okay, how does this work? Again, once per week, ideally on Monday mornings when everybody's very fresh and attentive. And in terms of reporting overhead, artifacts, I recommend simply using one slide, right? Like just one slide. And credit where credit's due. I originally got this from Christina Wadke's Radical Focus. If you're doing OKRs, you're probably familiar with her book. She's fantastic. Highly recommend it. But this is initially, I drew from her process into what I use today with clients. Long story short, you're looking at one slide. Everybody has their focused attention on one template of information. I'll show you an example in a second. And during the meeting, you follow a relatively rote script. And so this is the science aspect of it. In the very beginning of the meeting, you build momentum with weekly demonstrations of accountability. So I'll say exactly kind of how this works, but you started everything off right by demonstrating that whatever people said they would do last week, they then do. And then you immediately dive into the meat of it, which is confidence scoring. So for each of the three key results that you've committed to during the quarter, there is going to be one person who is a steward who is not responsible for achieving the key result, but they are accountable for knowing at any given time, at the drop of a hat, what the odds of success are for the entire team when it comes to hitting that key result, given how much time you have left in the quarter. Extremely important role. That is at the crux of this entire process. And that confidence score is very much like it's like a nerve center, right? To bring it back to the body metaphor. It is an aggregation of all of that information into a single data point that is just information rich. It's very dense. And I'm a big fan of data analytics and quantitative stuff. And so, confidence score is ultimately from 1 to 9 or 10 to 90%. But the key with this is that it should be driven by your gut instinct. So we'll talk about this in a second in the example, but one of the key responsibilities of the steward who is reporting this confidence score is that they need to be plugged into the right information sources on an ongoing basis. We'll talk about kind of how that looks, but super, super important, right? So they report the confidence score for each one of the key results. You look at the change between last week and this week, you make sense of the gaps, and then you look at where you are and where you want to be, which is a 9 or a 10, 90 or 10%. And that's basically in the entire meeting is you develop a team sort of common understanding to make sense of the gaps. And then step 2 is you look at wherever the biggest gap is, or what is most important to the organization in terms of the 3 key results. And you come up with a plan to move the needle. And that's an invitation to come up with creative, interesting ideas, use that executive function, imagination. And that's essentially how this all works. Okay, so to give you an example of one of these, how these meetings could work, this is a fictional example. A startup that is flying crypto oligarchs to charter cities in Latin America. Why not? That's the objective that they set for the quarter. They've got 13 weeks left. And then they have these 3 key results, which they set at the beginning of the quarter. You see in brackets, those are the stewards who are responsible for providing the confidence score. Okay. And you see in the lower left, these were two commitments that two different members of the team made at the beginning. Now, generally, in the previous meeting, generally speaking, this should rotate. So somebody who made a commitment last week, they're not going to make a commitment this week. You want to get the team to rotate around. So there's this nice flywheel of accountability. You start the meeting, you simply ask, all right, well, you actually at the top, restate the objective. So everybody kind of settles in and is focused. Okay, this is what we're here to do. This is how many weeks we have left. Charles, did you get the signature on the charter from the Transportation Security Administration? Yes, no. This should almost never be a no. This is something where if people do make a commitment, they should be 99.99% sure that they're going to make it. And so there's an art to, during the course of the meeting, if somebody does make one of these commitments, making sure it's kind of the right size. If it's too far in the future, you make it more proximal, so on and so forth. But the key is that this is something that they can do. Charles says yes. Next question is, okay, what did you learn in that process? Oh, I learned this, this, and this. Okay, cool. So we had the commitment, maybe a little bit of insight is shared. Same process for Maria. This takes 2 minutes. Then you dive right into the key results. Let's say you had the confidence scores from last week, and now you look at the confidence scores for this week. Okay. And in this case, the biggest gap is in that first key result. And so that's where you're going to start the conversation, right? And C is for Charles. And you would basically ask Charles or ask the team more broadly as a facilitator of this meeting, what happened? 50 point increase. I mean, that's huge. What's going on? And that conversation can last quite a bit of time. But the point is to identify that something substantial changed over the last week. There was something that happened where you knew that you didn't know, and so you ran an experiment, you tried something interesting and creative to move the needle, or something happened in the external environment that you didn't know about, but it's absolutely crucial that you make sense of it, right? Just like, if you touch something and you're in a lot of pain, you want to figure out like, oh, that's hot, like don't touch it, right? And readjust accordingly. Same kind of idea. The key is though, you're prioritizing the discussion based on where the biggest gap is to start. So once you've done that, maybe you do the other two, maybe not, there's no change. So that's probably not even worth discussing. And then you want to look at where the biggest gap is between where you are and where you want to be. So in this case, it would be the 1, right? You want to get that up and you say, all right, guys, what can we do to get this up this week? And a really key question you can ask, counterfactuals are already always really good for this. What would have to be true next week? Ask the steward, what would you have to see in order to get this to, let's say, a 3 or a 4? And so they have to do a little bit of creative thinking, kind of reason through it. Oh, well, this and that. And the other thing would have to be true. And then you ask the team, well, what can we do to make that happen? That's it. That's basically the whole meeting. And so, like I said, I've done this with many different teams, many quarters, different sizes, and across the board, honestly, when these really go right, you're maybe only discussing 1 or 2 key results the entire time. And most of the discussion is about the sense making and the planning. And because there's this new information that's coming in, and this opportunity to really get some creative thinking going, the conversations are just very interesting. I mean, like the most unexpected people will come up with these creative solutions. Well, what if we tried this? And maybe we can pull this person from this team. And, I heard this and whatever it is, and you come up with a plan and then you go execute, right? And it's like, okay, well, I'll, cliffhanger, we'll see how it goes. And, I'll see you on next week's episode of the OKR sync meeting. And so it makes it very interesting. But the key is here, okay, you've got the very reliable sort of ritual that you go through. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It's very light in terms of overhead. And then 2, there is that new information. There's the novelty that's happening during the discussion. It's exciting. Everybody's participating, right? And that's what keeps people on their toes and looking forward to it. This is just the script that I kind of ran through in terms of preparation and sort of, stuff that kind of bookends this. So just quickly talk about this. This is your KPI chart. This is very secondary. In terms of what this is, I actually don't get really nitpicky about the types of metrics that go in. It's kind of up to the team. I actually think it's fine to even have the same metrics for the key results. So you just see if there's progress over time. Traditionally, your OKRs are kind of like your GPS, and this is supposed to be like your car dashboard. I'd say in practice, you can kind of mix them up, and it's not a huge deal. But the important part is you see how many weeks you have left, right? So how much gas do you actually have in the tank? as you're trying to hit these key results. So it just keeps everybody oriented. Anyway, this is secondary. You probably don't even really talk about it directly during the meeting. It's just there for context. So in terms of prep, somebody, maybe you, whoever it is, somebody updates the KPI chart values in like the 2 minutes before the meeting. So it's just up there. You run the script, just like I went through. And as you're having the discussion, especially when it comes to figuring out what's going to move the needle, let's say on the second key result, that's where these ad hoc accountability priority tasks emerge, right? And so from what I observe, people will naturally, they'll come up with an idea, oh, I could do this, or we could do that. The other thing, that's an opportunity for you as a facilitator to say, oh, do you think that you can 100% accomplish this particular, end by next week? Oh, well, maybe 50% for that. You make it a little bit more proximal, right? So if it's a sales oriented thing, do you think you can actually, close the customer? No, I can't do it in 1 week. Oh, well, could you get a demo by next week? No, probably not. That'll take 2 weeks. Well, could you get on the phone with them this week or something like that? Yeah, I'm 99% sure I could do that, right? And then that enters into the ad hoc task. And the ad hoc task is probably something that is conducive to like a bigger, more radical experiment that the whole team kind of commits to in a cross-functional way during the meeting. But the important part is it's something where the person who's volunteering, who's committing to it, is like 99.9% sure they can do it. Okay, so that happens kind of naturally during the discussion. Clean up the slides, so you just kind of move stuff over so you don't have to do extra prep for the next time. And I also, this is a question I'm going to ask you all at the end of this. I do this like in every meeting, and I highly recommend doing this for you as a facilitator of this meeting on a weekly basis, is asking my favorite fist to 5 question, right? And this question allows you to get extremely rapid feedback that you can incorporate into improving the process, right? And tailoring it more to your company, your team, your initiative. And so you simply ask at the end in kind of the last 5 minutes or so, all right, from 0 to 5, where 0 was, this week's episode was terrible, getting 0 on IMDb or whatever, but this past hour was a total waste of time. And 5 being, this was a great episode and it was a great use of everybody's time. How are you feeling? And, people shouldn't be thinking too much about it. You just say on 3, throw up some fingers, whatever it is, look at what the results are, and then you pick out the anomalies. So let's say it's mostly 4s. If there's one person who had a 2, you ask the person with the 2, why not a 1, right? Because it wasn't a total catastrophe, so something worked for them. Figure out what that is. And then on the flip side, of course, what would it take to get to a 3 or a 4? And they'll talk about, what was missing or what they didn't like. And then you as a facilitator, you can just take that feedback on a weekly basis and very quickly improve how you're running the meeting. So this is more generic, but it's something that works very well for these weekly syncs in particular. Okay. Last but not least, I want to talk about pitfalls, right? And there's a range of pitfalls. Not all pitfalls are as consequential. You have the really bad stuff, the gaping abyss, and then you have the sprained ankles. So I'm going to start with the stuff that's not as consequential. Not hitting a key result or having your confidence score go down is not necessarily a bad thing, because again, remember the foggy river metaphor, you're trying to clear out the fog. Yes, you're trying to make progress, but it's more about learning and generating insight that you can capitalize on, whether it's over the next week or the next quarter when you do the reflection. And in fact, if the confidence score goes from like an 8 to a 2, that's actually really good, because it means that you learned something that you didn't know about before. So there might have been some limiting factor that you can address earlier on in the process that you may not have control over. Or you discover there's some deep problem that really needs attention, right? So, if all of a sudden, like you put your hand on a hot thing and you're in a lot of pain, that's actually good, because then you can make better decisions. Now, if you can't feel it and you leave your hand on the hot pan, that's quite bad, So having the confidence score down go down can be a good thing, and even missing the key result, as long as you learn, right? Okay, missing an ad hoc task, not good. Basically breaks kind of the accountability flow. And sets a not so great example for the rest of the team. So try to make sure that doesn't happen. Poor stewardship. So if the quality of the information is not good, so if your nerve clusters, your nerve centers are not aggregating the information effectively, it's missing info, whatever else, like the confidence score is not right, then it's almost impossible to make good use of this time. So very important that the stewards, and this happens at the OKR setting meeting, you get commitments from one of 3 people, the people on the team who are going to take stewardship, take charge, and steward the key results. Very important that they're plugged into excellent sources of information during the quarter. Generally speaking, I find it comes from one, two, or three different places. One is if they're on the front line, so to speak, interacting with customers or out in the field. Obviously, that's a source of information, so they're seeing firsthand what's going on. Two is something quantitative. So if you have access to like a database or a CRM or something where a KPI dashboard or something like that, you can do a little bit of analysis. The quantitative measures can feed into this. And then third, very important is having one-on-ones. If you're, manager, director, and executive with your directs, making sure information is flowing between people during kind of those one-on-one meetings or, lower level team meetings effectively, right? So through an trusted intermediary, just making sure you're getting really good information out of those. Okay, now we're getting into like the really bad stuff. Static confidence scores. If the confidence scores are not changing, that's really bad. And what's tricky about this is it's not necessarily easy to change this through a better OKR process or any of the things that I outlined. It's almost more of a mindset or a culture thing, right? And so the confidence scores are going to be more dynamic if the team is really out there doing new things. And so the team needs to feel empowered. They need to understand, hey, I don't need to justify or defend myself every week when I'm going into the meetings, which unfortunately this happens a lot. Like I mentioned at the beginning, when you're in status update hell, it's less about making sense of things and more about justifying whatever you did, right? So the team needs to be like really empowered. They need to be excited. They need to be aligned on this transcendent goal, which is the objective, and feel like they and whoever is under them can really do new things, take risks to move the ball forward, right? So if the confidence scores are static, that's a deeper issue. And that's what makes the meetings kind of boring as well, right? You want to see the volatility because you're learning. If you skip a weekly sync, that's just, I mean, I've seen this, I've done this myself. Even though I knew that this was true, I've made this mistake. As soon as you skip one meeting, the whole thing like actually can unravel very quickly. So don't do that. But make sure that all attendees, and the right size for all this, I would say, is generally about 5 people. Excuse me, 5 participants. Don't skip it. Make sure it's a very reliable ritual where people are showing up and they can feel confident that it's going to be the same format each time, the same participants, so on and so forth. If you have more than one objective and 3 key results, this just won't work. In my experience, there's just not enough time. I mean, like I said, there are meetings that some of the best meetings I've ever attended and facilitated where you're only talking about a single key result, right? And so if you have 15 key results or 3 objectives or whatever it is, there's absolutely no way that you can make that work. Okay, this is probably the worst thing that you can possibly do, to the point that this would actually lead me to end the engagement with the client, because the whole process kind of breaks. If you change the objective or the key results during the quarter, then the whole thing falls apart, right? And one of the reasons why is, how is the team supposed to trust that, you can make those longer term commitments and stick with it? And as soon as this happens, people will just not take it as seriously. So what this means is it really necessitates you do take this seriously, and you sort of burn the ships, so to speak, at the beginning of the quarter, and make sure that you're leaving enough breath that you can focus and get the right amount of depth when you're setting the right key results. So this is very much the art of it, but as a constraint, very important that everybody understands that these are not changing during the quarter, period. Okay, so to recap, if you want to get out of status update hell and enter weekly sync paradise, use confidence scores and make sure they keep moving. So if there's one thing you take away from that, it would be this. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can go to christianulstrup.com. That redirects to my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to send me a message if you have any questions that we don't cover today. And actually, let's do the Q&A first, and then I'll ask my Fist of 5 question with the few minutes that we have at the end.
Awesome, Christian. And I can actually, as we were going through the presentation, I can think about many times there is, the sprained ankle that we get because, there's a lot that we've not done probably in the past, which is really the pitfalls. So thanks for that really, really powerful presentation. I'm getting into the Q&A. This is from Christina, who has a question. The question is, how would you address the question that is confidence score really depends on the persona and character of the person reporting it? sometimes stewards are confidently incorrect. Some are conservative and would rather not overpromise.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think so the key here is it's got to be right. So you as a facilitator of the meeting, if you kind of notice this, so you feel like the confidence scores are not right, that necessitates that you take basically immediate urgent action. So there are ways to kind of deal with this during the quarter, and then ways to mitigate it up front. And a way that you can mitigate it is, again, it's sort of a mindset culture thing. People should really understand that as a steward, you're not held accountable for accomplishing the key result. You're simply accountable for surfacing quality information. And a way that this can work is you actually assign stewardship to somebody who has very little control over the variables that would affect the key result, so that they can be a little bit more of a dispassionate observer and feel, more secure to surface quality information. So if something has to do with marketing, maybe you have a steward who is not on the marketing team, right? The director of product or something like that. So that's a way to do it. And then during the quarter, if you notice that that's the case, that's something where I think during the one-on-one, using the framework that I identified, if somebody needs a little bit of coaching, simply working through, what sources of information might we get you plugged into on a regular basis, or helping thinking through, can you get good quality info through quantitative metrics? Can you spend some more time in the field talking to customers or wherever the action is happening on the front lines? Or figure out, maybe there are people on some other team where you're not having the regular one-on-ones, but perhaps you should start incorporating that into your regular weekly routine. And so a little bit of coaching on the back end between the meetings can help rectify this.
Thanks, Christian. And I think the answer, as you rightly said, is in the quality information which the steward has. And I think Christine also has a follow-up question, which is, so there's a comment in a question. I'm going to read that out. Provided we use the format you share, in a complex product-driven org where metrics and confidence don't change drastically in the middle of 2-week sprints, sometimes PMs find reporting out weekly on KRs to be tedious, as stories and sprints ladder up to key results. Have you ever seen KR sync work in organizations like this on a bi-weekly basis? So I think the question is, instead of weekly check-in, would bi-weekly check-in meetings work? Because I think things don't move. I think the point was things drastically don't move within 2-week sprints.
Interesting. So there are a few, what can I say about this? I guess the first thing is getting all the way back to the top on at least the way that I do the OKR process. It necessitates 2 prerequisites for this particular approach to really yield good results. And that's that you're really trying to do something new that you've not done before. And so if reliability is the name of the game, and reliability means not having the volatility like you're trying to aim for with these weekly episodes, then the framework just might not be the right fit, right? For running sort of a process like that. So that'd be the first question I would ask is, is it even the correct fit? Like, is this an initiative with the product teams where they're trying to launch something new or to really move the needle in a way that they haven't before? And if that's not the case, then I would just say this is probably not the right approach in the first place. Now, on the flip side, if let's say you are doing new things and you're running these sprints that are 2 weeks long, that may be the case. Maybe you're shipping every 2 weeks, but whoever the steward is, it's really incumbent upon them. And this is where, the conversation can go during the meeting, to figure out if there are other not intuitive, maybe sort of not normal actions or experiments that they can take or run during the upcoming week to increase confidence, right? So if you're expecting something to be actually delivered to customers in 2 weeks, then maybe you could go out of your way to have more customer discovery calls, or experiment with some new channel that you've never experimented before, or at least have those initial conversations, things like that. So so let me just look at the question again. Have you ever seen KR syncs on a bi-weekly basis? I've never seen this process work not weekly, period. And that's kind of on the gaping abyss side of the pitfall thing. Just in my experience, as soon as you move to less than once a week, the whole thing just totally unravels because people, they forget, or the rhythm's not right there. So I think question comes back to, is it the right fit? And then two, can you, sort of encourage folks to take those big risks outside of, the narrow scope of their stated responsibilities to try to introduce some novelty and some volatility to the confidence score for the next one.
Yeah, that's been our experience as well. 95% of teams we've worked with run weekly check-in meetings. The 5% are exceptions or probably haven't set up a good OKR rhythm. So completely second that. So that's great Q&As coming in. There was one more which a participant had actually mailed in. I thought I'd call that out, which is on, is there a way of setting the so OKRs? So the point that they were trying to make was OKRs is about progress, so moving the needle from point A to point B. And is there an art or a science to setting the point B? Because there's a lot to commit during the 90 days.
Oh yeah. So we talked about the setting of the objective and the key results. Totally. I mean, we could do a whole multi-hour session on that. So I actually do have some other slides that I pulled up. Okay, so just to kind of orient what we're talking about here, in this webinar, we've mostly talked about the middle part, so syncing. Just as important are the setting and the reflection components. And so there's a lot I could say about the setting part. I mean, 1 qualitative objective and 3 quantitative key results. I guess, Vidya, is there a particular facet of that maybe I could dig into?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you set the point B? How do you know whether it's not too aspirational or is it too unrealistic? Because we really need to commit to the process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, this comes from Christina's book. But in short, like to answer this very specific question, this is kind of my process that I run when I'll do a 5-hour workshop to set the objective and the 3 key results. You have some design thinking stuff that you do with sticky notes and so on and so forth. Some good prep. I think there's another recording of me talking about this on YouTube somewhere if you want to dig into it, or send me a message on LinkedIn if you're curious. But the key is with deciding whether or not the key results are too ambitious. So when you set the key results, the way I run this is you actually decide on the 3 metrics or the 3 measures first. And I'll just pull this up. They should have these criteria. I'm not going to walk through, but I'll just keep it on the screen. And there should be placeholders for each one of the measures or the actual metric or target XYZ. And then what you do is after you've committed to them, you sort of ask the group, what is the correct target such that where you are today, on this side of, the stepping stone, right? Given that it's very foggy and we don't know a lot, what is the correct target such that the very first confidence score at that first meeting is 50-50, is 50%. So if it's it's basically a coin flip at this point in time of whether or not you would hit it. If people are like, oh, they see a result like, oh, that's like 10%, or we're definitely going to make it, it's 90%. You should rejigger until the group kind of comes to a consensus that yes, it's like a 50% chance given what we know, then we can hit that in 12 to 16 weeks.
Thank you. That's very clear. I'm just getting back into the Q&A window. I just see a comment from Dr. Vasi. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Dr. Vasi. So, on that note, I think this is a really been a very, very interesting webinar for 2 reasons. One is it's a topic, as I mentioned, is probably least discussed in an OKR rollout. We have a lot of sessions on how to set OKRs or how to put rituals in place, but really not too much around zooming into a very important ritual like check-in meetings. And Christina, I just love the way that you actually connected the dots between different concepts to actually get that point across that these check-in meetings can actually be made a novelty. So on that note, I'm just going to hand it back to you for your fist of 5 and before we get to the wrap.
Awesome, Vidya. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. All right. So we've spent almost an hour together and everybody's time is very valuable, especially, well, I guess folks are around the world, but wherever you are. So I don't know how to collect this, but I would love to know, from 0 to 5, 0, this was a total waste of time. 5, you got a lot more out of this presentation and webinar than you expected. 0 to 5. I don't know if can we capture it in the chat or where can we get this? that
Yeah,
possible?
we're going to get this in the Q&A window because the chat seems to be disabled. So I would just request all the participants to just put it in the Q&A window on a scale of 1 to 5 or 0 to 5?
0 to 5. Yeah.
0 to 5. Okay.
If it was a 0, it probably would stick around, but.
Yeah. Okay. We're just getting a few responses. There's also a question, which is, could you give the presentation? So, okay. Very useful. 5. Okay. Great.
Nice.
Awesome.
Okay. Yes. In terms of presentation, so video, I'll, well, you're going to post this on YouTube. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. You post on YouTube and then I can send over a PDF with the slides.
Perfect. You actually got a 10 as well. So those is a 0 to 5 scale. So full 10 on 10.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Although that could have been a 1 that they fat fingered, I'm excited about it.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you again, Christine. And it's a complete 5 on 5 for me. And there's so much. I think what I really enjoyed is there was a lot of new learning that we can actually take back to our check-in meetings. What's the best way to get in touch with you if any of the participants want to reach you?
Yes, best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn. I publish content pretty regularly as well around OKRs and a lot around AI. We didn't really cover that, but AI and OKRs actually go together really well. That might be a topic I can talk about in the future. On LinkedIn, christianulstrup.com. If you don't remember the URL or whatever, there are not many Christian Ulstrup, so you could probably find me on LinkedIn. Yeah, connect with me, send me a message if you have any questions. I respond to every message I get. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with those of you who are interested in continuing the conversation. This was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun doing this. Vidya, thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. And I'm glad that at least some folks found it useful.
Thank you so much. It was extraordinary. And thank you to all our amazing attendees. We hope to bring you back more amazing webinars by Christian. He did speak about AI, so that's definitely going to be something that we are going to be talking about. So thank you so much, and everybody have a wonderful evening and a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.